Welcome to the Astrologers Challenge. So, boys and girls, we have two charts here. These are both people who have worked very hard at doing as little as possible and making as much money possible while doing that. Before we fault them for that, remember, any one of us given the opportunity would be doing the same thing, because who would not maximize their resources so they can get the most out of it with the least amount of effort? So, and these two particular people are in very, very different lifestyles. So one of these people grew up in a very affluent suburban upper middle class family, and also presents a false image of themselves and has made a career built on presenting a false image of themselves as the common person, one of you. Um, which is pretty entertaining because that was far from the case. They've had a very easy life, and they have not had the same struggles that the rest of us have had. This person is also, as you would expect, with a heavy second house emphasis, very uh, money conscious, and he is notoriously cheap, but more than that, he is also notoriously interested in being cheap with other people's money, which is kind of interesting. Now, the other person is or was actually one of us, one of the commoners, and has had a very interesting life. They originally were a special ed teacher. They to this day still have their license as a special education teacher, although obviously they don't work in that field for obvious reasons, mostly having to do with the alarm of the parents. They accidentally ended up in their career doing what they do, and just it worked. And this person is very entrepreneurial. So they've had their hand in a number of different enterprises over the years as far as different side businesses and trying to build up a brand and all sort of stuff. So very colorful character, very smart, very on top of things, and very, very entrepreneurial. So this doesn't really mean a lot unless you've ever tried to run your own business or you've done entrepreneurial made those types of efforts, and you really appreciate what that means when you say that about somebody, because it really takes a special kind of character to want to go out and launch things, even after failing at them repeatedly. So you just keep going in and find something else and see if it sticks to the wall. Now this person is also so notoriously cheap. It has been, it is an idiosyncrasy of this person that they have been known to pack their baggage in garbage bags, or like literally plastic bags, rather than actually paying for proper luggage when they fly. And they can certainly more than afford to purchase actual really good luggage. They just don't want to because they're cheap. Um, which we would also expect from a second house emphasis. So before I tell you who they are, let's go through the charts. So for person A on the left, let me put some here, person A, and this is person B. So for person A, the first thing that we're going to notice, and like you can't miss it, right? Neptune right there on the ascendant. And what did we say? This is somebody who's made a lifetime building up this image of themselves as something that they're not. In this particular case, they've built up an image of themselves as a common person, one of us, one of the plebeians. And that's not true at all. The parents of this person were actually both, one was a very affluent, no, right, the father was a very well-to-do, successful attorney, and the mother was a housewife, and they grew up in a very upper middle class suburban neighborhood. But to hear them talk, you'd think they were just a regular blue-collar Betty or blue-collar Barney. Totally not the case. So some of the other things we might look at is, okay, well, what would this person do for a profession? Maybe that'll tell us who it is. And so right here, Mercury rules the midheaven. We've got the south node here, right? And we'll come back to the south node in a second. We'll circle back to that. And we've got some planets in the 10th house. The ruler of the 10th is in the second house. So we would expect this person to have been involved or uh, gravitate towards at some point as part of their career: money, economics, finance. So this could literally be anybody who works in the banking systems all the way up to world economics, or finance controllers. But money is definitely a very big issue for them, um, and a primary focus, and would be something that comes through their career. Now, the other thing is that it is in Capricorn, and Capricorn. So here's what I think is interesting, right? So the 10th house ruler is in the second house. So we know there's an emphasis on money, right? And finances and resources. So always remember, the second house is not just about money, it's about our resources, whatever that happens to be at the time. Capricorn is the sign of managing resources. So wherever you find Capricorn, you're going to find a heavy emphasis on more, what's the word I'm looking for? Not pragmatic, but more stingy, just more just more stingy use of resources, because Capricorn hates waste and they want to maximize everything that's available to them in terms of resources. And resources for a Capricorn also is everything from money to physical goods to time to resources and to labor, not only their own labor, but yours as well. So they're very good about managing the people around them as a source of resources. So there's that. Now, the thing about it is, when we look at a chart, we can't get away from who we are. So we have to also consider the sun and the moon, because in order for you to be successful at something, you have to be in a position where you are strong and working from a strong skill set, and also it has to be comfortable, it has to fit your personality. So right here, we've got the sun and the Venus again in the second house. This is somebody who's very money driven. So even if they weren't working in finance, this is somebody who would be very driven to accumulate as much material wealth as possible, which may or may not be a good thing, because remember, these things tell us a lot, but they don't tell us about character development. So who you become in the process of pursuing these things, that's a whole other conversation. So what disposits the sun and the Venus is Uranus, which is here in Libra, and look at this, the moon is conjunct Spica. So this is somebody who would in this lifetime achieve through sheer determination, but also through some divine intervention and luck with that moon conjunct Spica, opportunities for amassing a tremendous amount of material wealth. Now, the thing about it is, because we have air signs involved here, this is not somebody who, it's kind of a weird thing. So this is not somebody who sees money as real, right? It's all very academic for them, which may or may not be a good thing depending on what is at stake. So with the sun and Venus in Aquarius, and disposited by Uranus in Libra in the 10th, this is somebody who's drawn to ideas. They like the idea of money. So I would definitely look at somebody who's going to be more geared towards the intellectualizing of resources, and specifically resource management, right? And remember, it's not always about money. That's just usually the shortcut or the easy way to spot it. So with the moon in conjunct Spica here in the 11th house, one of the other things that we can look for is that this is somebody who may gravitate to groups and organizations. This is not somebody, so this is and is not. So on the one hand, this is somebody with a sun in the second house. This is somebody who prefers working by themselves. They're not really team players, in spite of the fact that the sun's in Aquarius. However, with a moon in the 11th house, this person needs friends, they need social contacts, and they need networks. With a moon conjunct Spica in the 11th house, we're looking at somebody who's going to make their greatest fortunes through their networking and their social contacts. So they will benefit tremendously from literally who they know, not what they know. Now, here, they've got Jupiter and Scorpio is a funny position. They have Jupiter and Scorpio in the 11th, opposing Saturn and Taurus in the 5th. So there's a lot to be said, and I'm not going to get too much into this because I really want to jump into the other chart. With Jupiter and Scorpio, one of the funny things about Jupiter and Scorpio is they're always, not always, but 9 times out of 10, when you find somebody Jupiter and Scorpio, you'll find that they are really overly interested in other people's resources. They really want to know how much money you have and, what your savings are and all sorts of stuff that nobody has any business knowing. Like, how much do you get paid every week? So you'll find people with Jupiter and Scorpio in positions where they have access to information that that they, as a layperson, would not be privy to. So these are people who are drawn to things like private detective work, real estate, because if you're going to buy a house, you've got to hand over all your financial information. Like, oh my God. Um, this is also people who are attracted to information like information data aggregation, people who are involved in harvesting information and data up and above and beyond, right? What normal people would need to know. IT security, right? Um, and stuff like that. So it's a peculiar thing with Jupiter and Scorpio. They're always trying to literally get in your pants. So it's either your pockets or the other part of your pants, but they're always trying to get in somebody's pants, um, usually through their pockets. Anyway, the other thing with Jupiter and Scorpio is it tends to put an overemphasis on, well, power, frankly. So people will often say that this is all about sex, 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 sex. But with Jupiter and Scorpio, they're only interested in sex if it is an avenue to power. The real thing that gets them off and gets them going is power. Now, with Jupiter and Scorpio here in the 11th house and this moon conjunct spike in the 11th house, I would expect this to be somebody who's a power broker. This is somebody who's all about knowing the right people, being in the right places at the right times, with the right people, being at the right parties. This would be a consummate opportunist because they'd be very good at it. So I would look for somebody who's very heavily connected in things that involve groups and organizations that would obviously create financial benefit for them. So now let's go back here for a second. This Jupiter opposes Saturn. Now here's what's interesting. Anytime you have Saturn in Taurus, you're going to have somebody who's got really legitimate, serious concerns about financial security. And I've said this before and I'll say again, I'll say this over and over and over again every time Saturn comes up when we're talking about it in a chart. Saturn is the place where it hurts the most. Do not ever mess around with somebody's Saturn position because it is where they are the most vulnerable, and only somebody who is stupid or sadistic would go in there and shove a knife in that, or acid or salt or anything else. Just leave those Saturn things alone. Because listen, unless you're a qualified psychotherapist and you're able to medicate this person and do the 20 years of therapy and psychoanalysis that's necessary to put them back together after you push them over the wall, and break Humpty Dumpty, you have no business messing around with people's Saturn. So there's your pro tip for the day. So Saturn and Taurus, there's a lot of stuff that goes with Saturn and Taurus. I'm not going to get into too much here. Anyway, with Jupiter opposing Saturn in Taurus, resources takes on a huge emphasis. So in a lot of ways, material security and financial resources becomes the same thing as having a lot of power, and they want as much of it as they can possibly get. So this is somebody who is very much all about themselves. So, and no, I know that sounds pretty derogatory. So let me back you up and catch you up here. And remember, we can't determine character, but some things we can determine. Moon in Aries is the most singularly selfish position in a chart. There are some others that are almost as selfish or just as selfish, but Mars in Aries is pretty much at the top of the list. So with Mars in Aries, a heavy second house emphasis, right? Jupiter opposing Saturn right here tells us that this is somebody whose primary orientation in life is what they need, what their agendas are, what's good for them. Literally, me first, always, every time. Now, what's interesting is you would think with all of that selfishness, you would see this person coming, right? Well, here's the thing. This is the magic of Neptune. Neptune makes things softer and more beautiful and creates these veils of illusion around people. So with Neptune on the ascendant, this very self-driven, self-absorbed, me first person is always going to come off looking like the sweetest, most harmless, like just wouldn't hurt a fly. just the sweetest thing you've ever met in your life. This is literally the most dangerous kind of people you want to deal with because you'll never see them coming. So, who is this person and what is their occupation? Are you ready for this? This is Senator Paul Ryan, or the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, that just retired. So his biography, his life history is actually not very interesting because he's never really done a lot. He's never had a lot of challenges in his life. So it's pretty much, he grew up in a nice neighborhood with, a working father and a stay-at-home mom, went to college, got a great job, got another great job, then ended up in the thing. Like that's pretty much the trajectory of his life. There's not a whole lot going on there. So it'll make for a short read, but it's a very interesting one because there is a lot of mention about this false impression that he sold people on, as part of his political rise, and getting up there. So it would be interesting to go back and take a look and see if he does in fact have any background in college in economics, because I'll bet you he does. Economics and business, because that is what all that's about. All right, so now let's go to chart B. Okay, now in chart B, we have the moon in the north node on the ascendant, which is pretty nice. And sun, again, we've got this heavy second house influence. So this is somebody who's very concerned about money, right? And having resources. So let's start with the 10th house, because this is a sex worker, right? So let's see if this whole story people keep giving us about the 8th house being about sex and drugs and rock and roll, let's see if this applies. So we've got Scorpio on the midhaven, right? And so Scorpio is an 8th house sign, so maybe that, right? Now, what's interesting about this particular 10th house, he has the fixed star Agena on the midhaven. Agena indicates popularity with the masses, right? So this is somebody who would be very well received by the public in whatever they do. There is some fame or wealth that's possible with this, but this popularity with large groups of people is the most significant thing here. The other thing is when you've got the moon and the north node, but specifically the moon angular like that, you typically have somebody who's very responsive to the public. So this is somebody who typically has this ability to read an audience very well. And you'll actually see this a lot with comedians where the moon is on an angle because there's an emotional connection they have instantly. There's this rapport that they build with people around them instantly, which allows them to build that emotional connection, which inspires laughter. So this person would have the innate ability to build like a kind of a rapport with people. So this would be somebody who's very, very good at working in the public. All right, so what about the chart ruler? Or the midhaven ruler. So the ruler of the 10th house in this chart is Mars. All right, so where is this one's Mars? Well, look at this. He's got Mars in Aries too. All right, and it's conjunct Venus. Woohoo, Mars-Venus conjunction. So we're looking at this and we're like, well, what kind of hot mama do we got here, right? So when you have a Venus-Mars conjunction, it really kind of brings the love nature and the sexual nature together. It's kind of the same, which makes it, well, it just makes them a lot easier to read and a lot more predictable. It can also make them very selfish. So this one is not necessarily any less selfish than that one. They're both very, very selfish. Second house emphasis, Mars and Aries, very, me first. Okay. The only difference is this one carries the Sun and Venus in fixed air signs. This one, thank God, has that Sun in a water sign. So that helps a lot. All right, but we'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so the 10th house ruler is Mars. Mars is conjunct. Oh, look at that. Mars is conjunct the 3rd house. Well, that doesn't look like anything to do with sex, drugs, or rock and roll, but it does show an involvement with teaching and communication. And this person was, in fact, a special eds teacher. So right there, that makes all kinds of sense. So now, what else do we have here? So we've talked about the moon and the north node, right? And all this dealing with the public being very popular with the masses. Let's get rid of that. And what else do we got here? Well, look at this. Neptune is conjunct Spica, or Arcturus, but it's conjunct those fixed stars. Same one as this one. So they're both carrying this very special fixed star, very prominent. Now this one carries Spica in the 8th house. It's kind of really on the edge there, so it's technically actually over in the 9th, because it's right there on the cusp. So we're still not seeing a lot of 8th house emphasis here, right? Because there's nothing there. Well, maybe it's the 5th house, right? Well, there's nothing there either. And the 5th house is all about creativity and stuff like that. So, okay, well, maybe we'll look at the ruler of the 5th house, right? And the only reason that we're spending this much time trying to locate where the sex work shows up in this chart is because, I mean, this is a pretty unusual occupation. You know, it's like if you had, you know, somebody who was famous and had been very successful and decided to go into a career as, oh geez, ladies, I don't know, a drug dealer, right? I mean, this is clearly not an occupation people go running towards. So when this stuff comes up, it's like, whoa, where is that in the chart, right? Okay. So here, Mercury rules the 5th house. So maybe the ruler of the 5th, which, by the way, is also the ruler of the 8th, maybe this can tell us where the sex work is in this person's chart. So Mercury rules that, and Mercury is right there, retrograde in the 2nd house. Well, that's interesting. So the 5th and the 8th house ruler in the 2nd house indicates that the focus would be on money. And obviously, if you're going into sex work, you're definitely going in for the money. I don't think you're going in for the popcorn. But Mercury is retrograde, so it kind of makes it weak. So it almost looks like this is not their best or ideal choice, right? So we're not seeing it there either. So for all intents and purposes, when we look at this, the occupation that would make the most sense is their early career as a special education teacher. We're not actually seeing anything that gives us a very clear indication, oh my God, there's sex work involved. And the reason I'm saying this is because I was looking at the charts of a couple of people, and there's nothing that we typically associate with classic signatures for sex um, that show up in their charts either. And these are famous people. So uh, there's more to that conversation that needs to be explored, but a lot of it has to do with getting over puritanical kind of like weirdo stuff about it. And a lot of this really bad, cheap astrology is being peddled these days. The simpleton astrology, you know, cookbook stuff. Anyway, so, oh, there we go. So this person, I erased and didn't know I did it, is Ron Jeremy, Mr. Jeremy. So here's the thing, like if you've ever seen Ron Jeremy, he's the porn star, you know he's the hedgehog. He's known as the hedgehog. Ron Jeremy is short, he's hairy, he's not very attractive, and he's fat. I mean, there's nothing about this man that screams super stud. And yet he is wildly popular. He's probably one of the only male porn performers that works in heterosexual porn that anybody even knows the name of. Because typically in those types of films, they don't care about the men. I mean, honestly, outside of Ron Jeremy, can you honestly think of one guy in that industry other than John Holmes? Right, those are the two. And there are lots and lots of guys who perform in these films. Sylvester Stallone did it at one point before he was actually able to make a success doing some kind of work acting. So there are a lot of guys in and out of that industry, and we don't know who they are. Nobody knows who they are, but we remember two names. We remember John Holmes, and we remember Ron Jeremy. And John Holmes is a lot better looking than Ron Jeremy. But remember, Ron Jeremy's got that moon in the North Node near the ascendant. He's got that ability to connect with people, and he does, right? And he's got Agena, success with the masses, right there on the midheaven. So right there, this all gives him an extra boost. Now, does any of this show that he is a sex worker or he would have gone into porn? No, absolutely not. And is there a reason for this? Well, maybe. I don't know. I will have to take some time and examine it, but we'll have to take some time and examine it against the charts of many other people in that industry in their specific sub occupation, right? But so there you go, folks. These are the charts of our mystery people for January. Now, these are the things, and this is what I thought was very, very interesting about these charts. So here's what they have in common. They both have a very heavy second house emphasis, right? They both have Mars and Aries. They both have planets at Spica. Okay. And right, they both have important rulerships. This one's got the 10th house ruler, Mercury, and we know that this person has gone into adult films, and their rulership, right, for that is also Mercury, both of these being placed in the second house. Again, people who've spent a good deal of their time trying to make as much money as possible doing as little work as possible. And listen, I'm not knocking it. I mean, hey, senators or porn performers, they're all making more money than I am. Okay. Yes. And that is it. So I thought that was interesting. And you guys can explore those charts and kind of look up their life histories, because their biographies are available online, and you can kind of compare your notes with what you're reading about them that we're allowed to know it's the public, and compare it to the chart and take a look. So I hope you enjoyed this. And we'll have another astrologers challenge in a couple of months, and we'll talk to you guys later. Bye.